Welcome friends, it's Caleigh Bird, and today I have got a much requested video for you on how to create a variety of skin tones. For my own personal works, I usually tend to use an extended palette. However, I like to show you that using just the 5 basic colors, including white, that I shared with you on the Beginner's Artist Palette video a few weeks ago, you can create a beautiful variety full of vibrant skin tones to suit any occasion. So if you learned something today, please hit that thumbs up button so more folks see it. Make sure you're subscribed and go ahead and ding the notification bell so you're back every single week for all the best fine art tutorials and art biz advice. Let's practice making skin tones with our original limited palette. First things first is I would always make a bit of green because skin tones, all skin tones, have more green in them than you would imagine. So since in our limited palette we don't come prepared with a green, let's mix up some so that it's on the ready. Now I'm going to switch to mixing with a paintbrush simply because I'm only going to be mixing small amounts to show you by example. However, if you're mixing up quantities, you need to continue with the palette knife as I did with the green. So all skin tones are going to start off with a bit of yellow, some red, and some white. As well as some green to neutralize. Now if you want it to get lighter, you'll want to add in more yellow and white. And you'll simply keep going up the line. Add more and more white to get it lighter. The nice thing about skin tones is that as they get lighter, they actually do become more of a pastel. So with a lot of other things, you can't necessarily just add more and more white, but with skin tones, it does tend to work, at least for lighter tones. At some point, your skin tones will probably need to take a cooler dimension, in which case you can dab into your blue very, very lightly. For a bit of a ultra fair skin tone, there are some people and cultures that stay far away from the sun and their skin tone stays incredibly light, and that's when you would want it to have a bit of a cooler tendency, as well as skin tones in shadow can tend to have a bit of a cooler tendency. So we just made a nice gradation of skin tones here just by adding a little bit more white and a little bit more blue. Now to go darker. With this, if you are taking this skin tone and want to bring it a bit darker, you can start by adding in, of course, a bit of your dark umber, your raw umber, but you don't want to add too much because it acts like a black, so you'll want to keep it a bit warmer. So if you're going to be trying to intensify and bring down the skin tone, you'll want to continue to make sure that there is that bit of warmth in there. So we can bring it darker. If you have a very intense shadow. And don't forget that shadows often can be rather cool. So sometimes bringing in a bit more blue than you would imagine actually makes for a more legitimate shadow. These are tonally quite similar, but if you notice, this one is much cooler. This one sort of seems to reflect a shadow, whereas this one just looks like a warm, deep tonal value. So bringing in plenty of blue helps. And as always, that green is going to help you neutralize anything. If you want to do, you know, more of like a blush or lip tone, something like that, you might think that you want just a whole lot of pink, but in fact that might be a bit too much for you. So anytime something becomes a little bit too bright, just bring in a touch of that green, and it's going to bring it back down to planet Earth a little bit. Now let's say we want to start with a skin tone that is a bit darker complected in general. We would still want to start with that yellow and that red. And I would even venture a little bit of white, not a lot, much less, but a little bit of white. And that's because white will neutralize and pastel things. So a bit of white is good. But we're going to bring in more of the green and more of the red. And now we can consider this our midtone instead of this one being our midtone. As we had discussed in previous videos, tonal value is not about the color itself, it is about the shade or the tone of it in relation to other shades. So we can start with this being our midtone, and to get it darker, of course, going to add some more of that dark umber. That raw umber is going to help. And you may find that just adding this is going to be good because it creates a cooler brown. So when we are in deep shadows, you will want a cooler brown. So just adding those two together is fine. However, there's also the option to add a bit more red to continue with this same family of skin tone, but just to bring it a little bit more intense in tonal value. Because since it is a darker skin tone to begin with, we're going to need the tonal values to be a bit lower than the bright ones, but having a place that's deep in tonal value, it's different than perhaps having a place that is a direct shadow. So we've got a warmer, deep tonal value here for areas that are just going to be a bit deeper in tone, and then we have a cooler one here. But if we really wanted to cool that out, you would add a touch more blue again, and make this more of a cool shade that is actually shaded, and this is a deeper tonal value that might not necessarily be so much in the shade. So now to make this one lighter, we can add a bit of yellow as well as some of the white. And the reason is that with darker skin tones, they tend to be a bit warmer. They're sort of more jewel toned. So we don't want to just add white, because that will really sort of, it will not only make them lighter, but it will make them less, literally less pigment rich, less melanin rich, and that's not what we want. We want darker skinned folks to still have richness in their skin tone. We don't want them to just be whiter shades of brown. That's not the point. The point is to give them a richness in skin tone. Now we can bring it slightly lighter again. We'll add a little bit more back and forth. You can even warm it up a bit. Give a little bit of pinkness to the flesh tone. I know I've said this before, but it's all about small bits, small mixes, small mixtures. It is an experimentation every time. You're constantly trying to match whatever it is you're trying to paint. So the best thing you can do is do small mixtures at a time, so that you never wind up wasting a big pile of paint. So here we go, and it can just continually get lighter and lighter. Now when you go to do some sort of bright highlight. You might need a dash of white on either kind of skin tone. So a bright highlight might be that bright on any kind of skin tone. So realize that even if you are painting darker skin tones or lighter skin tones, the crossover is extreme. They're very similar. We are all one big happy family on this world, and it just has slight gradations depending on if you're doing darker skin folks or lighter skin folks. Want to learn even more about oil painting? Awesome, you are in luck because this video is actually just one part of my complete guide to oil painting series, which includes videos not only about the best paints, brushes, and supplies to stock in your own art studio, but detailed instruction on how to actually use all your supplies, as well as sharing my own personal painting techniques. You can actually watch this entire series completely for free, either on my Skillshare or here in this playlist right here, because I have got a wealth of oil painting knowledge to share with you. So if you did learn something today, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed, hit the notification bell, and come back every single week for all the best fine art tutorials and art biz advice.